In the Newsroom is a production in partnership with Studio Stillwater. Every week, journalists from the Stillwater News Press invite listeners to join us in the newsroom and hear the story behind the stories. Hello and welcome to In the Newsroom. I am editor Bo Simmons. With me today, producer Chris Peters.
Howdy, folks.
City editor Michelle Charles.
Good afternoon.
Reporter Ashlyn Huffman.
Hello.
Oh boy. Hey, what was the exclamation point discussion that you said we left off last week, Ashland?
I forgot.
Forgot what our issue with the exclamation points
We were
was?
talking about emails.
Oh, okay.
Remember?
Quotes.
No. Emails, when you said that you don't send exclamation points in emails.
Oh, no, I do. Actually, that's the only time I use them.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You know, it's like that meme where it's like, hi, I'm writing an exclamation point now to show you that I'm enthusiastic and friendly. Now I'm going to end this sentence with a period so I don't look crazy.
Okay.
Here's two
I don't
more.
think I've seen that one.
Yeah.
But no, because I was thinking about that because, so we'll edit those out a lot of times in press releases. We never write them ourselves. Even if someone's exclaiming, we don't really use exclamation points.
No.
But yeah, I think for whatever reason, if you can't say thank you without an exclamation point, or someone's going to, did you even mean it?
Oh, yeah.
That was it's very specific, wasn't it, Ashland?
Yeah, because you
me,
put thank you, period.
Oh, you're
now I remember.
referencing a Facebook group message.
Was it?
No, this was
No?
Twitter when
Okay.
I posted that video
Twitter.
of Jack in the snow, and I was like, hey, boss, I know you hate the snow, but here's this
Oh,
video of
yeah.
a dog.
That came from me.
And then he was like,
saying-
thank you, period.
See, that was our other weather event. We're getting really used to them here.
Yes.
So our other, that was just a 4 to 5 inches of snow, whatever that was. And we're already sick of it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
most of us. And I think I just posted something that said, the only redeeming thing about snow is watching dogs playing it.
Absolutely.
And so you
And then
sent
I
me.
sent him a video on Twitter of my dog playing in snow, and he did not
and
appreciate it.
she was crushed because I wrote thank you without an exclamation point.
Because people are going to see that. And they're going to be like, oh, Bo doesn't even like Ashland.
It's better to not punctuate at all.
That's
Then
what I
put
was
a
going to
period.
say.
Period.
Yeah.
It's like, why did you punctuate? This is Twitter.
It's aggressive.
Is there a part in the AP style guide that just says exclamation marks?
Ooh,
Never
I don't know.
use them.
I'd have to go way back.
I mean, is it appropriate in
I mean,
a headline or
college
like
introduction?
I mean,
level
it's
stuff.
one of those things that's not even taught.
Right.
It's not something we
Right.
bring up. I think it's just a well-known fact that you don't use an exclamation point in journalism.
Okay, but if you're, I don't know, Pearl Harbor. Okay, things like that. There are certain events, there are certain things where I feel like I've seen exclamation points in
Yeah.
the past. But only for very certain things. It's not something that we're going to do. I will say I get a disturbing number of press releases that contain what feel like
Right.
excessive exclamation points.
And the idea is, we're not just bagging on all writers out there, but
No.
I think the idea for us is we're supposed to be good enough that we can paint a picture, we can describe something, and is show, don't tell, right? That's the idea. You can write something well enough where you can get the feel of an event or something happening without having to use a lot of adjectives or exclamations.
Right.
Now, sometimes I'll leave it in a direct quote if it's not the end of it with an end quote, but if there's a lot, I won't.
But that's if you're pulling that quote from a written quote?
Yeah, that's only if it's a written one. I will never insert an exclamation point. I even feel a bit weird adding it to emails because I don't want people to think I'm overexcited.
No, I do understand that.
Even though at times I would say if you were just getting a transcript of you, there would be tons of exclamation points.
Probably, yeah. I get excited about a lot of things, but
Yeah. But no, you're right. It's like the same thing. The reason we don't use a lot of adjectives, a lot of adverbs. The idea is if you need to use an adverb, then the verb you used was not strong enough. And you need to really set that scene But yeah, that is a thing. As people communicate more and more written, texting and things like that, the grammar, what is accepted, what it's expected, changes. In one of our group chats the other day, Ashlyn threw something out and Bo just threw her a thumbs up.
Aggressive.
And we've determined that is sometimes his intention of kind of shutting us down, or it's like very faint praise. It's basic acknowledgement, nothing else. Then I tried to top it by doing a thumbs up with a period after it.
Even more aggressive.
This show title's totally going to be full of exclamation points.
But so my response on group chats has been just Futurama gifs.
It is.
Okay, but those are funny. It's almost like my dad. Anytime I send him anything, all he says is nice. Like, are you serious? Nice? It doesn't matter what I send. It's always nice.
Man. Yeah, no, Bo's lost control of the Futurama gifts.
If you go to Walgreens, their in-store brand for like their chips and stuff is nice.
Oh yeah,
it's nice with an exclamation mark.
Sure,
it's really nice.
It's not just nice.
It's nice.
Oh. Exactly.
Oh, local news.
Yes,
Michelle, you said the city was not. It's not just that they've been hiring. Everyone's hiring, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
But they are actually maybe reorganizing to alter their labor situation.
Yes, I'm looking at some stuff right now. The city of Stillwater, like a lot of other employers, is having trouble filling vacancies. And so they're looking at some of the things that would set them apart, that would maybe make people more likely to want to work for them. I mean, in Stillwater, especially for like more blue collar type jobs, the city was always seen as a great employer. Like if you could get on at the city, that was a good solid job. It was a decent wage,
good
more
benefits.
more than you could make most other places, good benefits, good health insurance, retirement. They were very desirable jobs. In some of the professional categories where you need degrees and certifications in certain things like urban planning and engineering and things like that, apparently they're having trouble keeping up with private industry in terms of the wages. Now, they can't necessarily just start paying a whole lot more without throwing the city budget out of whack, right? So what are they going to do? How do you compete? You compete on benefits. You compete on work hours. You compete on scheduling. So those are some of the things that they're looking at doing. There's going to be a study session Monday. It will have already happened probably by the time this comes out, but where city leaders are going to be looking at that. What can they do to make working for the city more desirable? Is it changing shifts? Is it sweetening the retirement system? What is it? What is going to do that? And I haven't read the results yet. I just got the stuff this afternoon. But they're also they did an employee survey to try to determine, what kind of issues employees had. What could they do? What do people actually value? Because sometimes what employers think people want isn't necessarily, and the changes that they make aren't necessarily the things that bother people about their jobs and make them want to work somewhere. So I'll be looking at that. I'm looking at that as soon as we leave here, looking at those reports. I've been pulling unemployment statistics and things this afternoon because, by the way, unemployment in Payne County in December, 1.5%.
That's incredible.
That is incredible. Absolutely. Lower than the state average, by the way, which was 2.3, which is still incredibly low.
And unemployment numbers are only for people that actually file, right? So if you say you left your job for whatever reason and you do not file, you don't do anything, you are not necessarily counted in those numbers, right?
Well, you don't have to be registered with the state unemployment system, but it's generally people who are actively looking for a job or who have looked for a job within the last 4 weeks. And there are some other things too. I'm actually also pulling up technical definitions of these things because there is a definition of full employment, which does not mean everybody has a job. It's an economic thing. Basically, it means that everything's in equilibrium and that you have everybody working and the economy is putting as much stuff out as you can without inflation going up. It's an economic term, actually.
Yeah.
So
Well, and there may be even a larger picture, when we got our census back, how, people are leaving rural communities for, urban settings, or they were, and within the last 10 years, that was sort of the trend. So I wonder, a shrinking population could lower unemployment, I would think, just.
no, absolutely. Absolutely. You've got a lot of
positions to
things.
fill, yeah.
In rural areas, you are losing population in a lot of places. So, yeah, less population would be fewer workers. And then also, the impact of COVID. I mean, the fact is there were people who died from COVID who were in the workforce. There are people who are still dealing with long haul symptoms. There are, and it's not just that. I'm not saying
Early
that.
retirees.
Or people who chose to retire early. Think about the teachers who chose to retire because they were not comfortable going back into the classroom. I mean, the pandemic definitely had a ripple effect, but the result is that we're looking at historically low unemployment, and we've got employers who are really, really competing for those workers. Now, the interesting thing, though, is if you dig into LinkedIn and you look at people who are searching for jobs, you see a lot of people saying, you know what, I keep hearing about this, and all these employers saying nobody wants to work. That's kind of the cliche now. And they're saying, I've applied for 25 jobs and no one will hire me. So there is sort of a sense that some employers still have not made that mental adjustment, and they still kind of feel like they can put out this whole big wish list of skills that they want or experience that they want from an employee. And maybe they haven't made their expectations more realistic given the current job market, or they haven't adjusted their wage structure yet because they don't want to have to do that. So that's another issue. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, look forward to that, to see how it all shakes out. Now, not as local, but I think, Chris, you were talking about how we sort of bring something home to people, right? The invasion in Ukraine.
How we localize.
Yeah, far from our shores, but how do we bring it home to our audience? And I was telling you, part of when it was right around, I guess this was my first year working. It was a year after 9/11, so different people were enlisting, and it was sort of like everything we wrote about was sort of a profile on people we knew who were going to war, the sort of rallies at home, those kinds of things. This is a little bit different. The U.S. is not involved after 20 years of war. The administration's really reluctant to jump into another one. So we've been kind of, I talked to an Oklahoma State teaching assistant professor of Russian who was sort of giving me sort of the point of view of what he's learned about Russia's situation. And Michelle, you talked to, who was it you talked to?
I talked to Elena Atkinson, and she is someone who, if you've done anything with United Way in Payne County over the last few years, Elena was the face at the desk. She was the person who answered the phone. She was the person who knew where everybody was, who connected you to what you needed. She is originally from Ukraine. She has lived in the U.S. for quite a while. She left in, I think, 1998, she said. She's married to an American man who is an artist, and she's a photographer as well as, being very involved in the community. And anyway, yeah, I got to talk to Elena today. She has been talking to some friends back home in Kharkiv, which is the town that she's from. It's in eastern Ukraine, kind of toward the north. She said the city is currently surrounded on 3 sides by Russian troops.
Wow.
And her friends are reporting, sounds of. She said she could hear explosions in the background when she was talking to her friend on Skype.
That's scary.
And I guess that's one of the more populous cities on the Russian border. Other places like Kyiv, where people are entering from Belarus, and there are different places, different entry points. Because Russia's so vast, and they are allied with different people, but
right.
She
said it's the second largest city in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Wow. And then, Bo, who did you talk to again?
Jonathan Ludwig. Yeah, I guess I left out his name earlier. Yeah. I saw like an interview he did with the Okali, it was a short interview, so I thought I'd ask him some more questions. He really is focused, I guess, on the larger thing, but sort of the background and, how Putin had got to this point. Very subjective, and everyone has sort of different takes on it, but his is that Putin really desires what he calls like reestablishing the Russian Empire, which I would have thought, my first thought was, seizing Ukraine for, its resources and for, the tactical advantage, it would give them. Or in the larger picture of sort of realigning the the old Soviet nation, the USSR, and he talked about it more in like even deeper terms than that.
The old Russian Empire, right. Recreating that
SARS.
Yeah, really, which would give him more power because. Yeah.
And it was actually interesting because Elena said exactly the same thing.
Really?
She said he wants to be a czar.
Yeah. So it's like because if say it was just he managed to reestablish the USSR, and you still have to have like consensus, and you still have to run things by a lot of people, and so personally he's seeking more power.
And the assistant professor said that he thinks the only way this will end is if Putin is no longer in power.
Yeah, I think, and maybe he thinks that it could be the beginning of the end, depending on how things play out, because at the beginning of this, I think a lot of the national community kind of thought either this is sort of a ploy to make sure no one else joins the European Union, to make sure that they can control like the eastern border. And, he's saying, and now a lot of other people are saying, it's much larger than this. And I think the current administration was, in the intelligence they got, we're saying this could be a full-on invasion, which is much more of what it looks like now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, one of the things that, Elena talked about that she thinks could make it tough in terms of pushback. She said that she really wants to learn more about the history of Ukraine because so much of the history that she learned as a kid was written by Russians from a Russian perspective. Mm. And so you're not necessarily learning about Ukraine as a separate place with its own identity. It was always within the context of how it related to Russia. And she has family who also moved to Russia, who lives in Russia. Hmm. And, she said her family members, when she talks to them, she described them as being brainwashed. And I think just what she means is they get state-run media reports and they accept it. And, and they want to believe in their government and they want to believe what they're being told. And so, I mean, we see footage of or photos of protests, and we're hearing of things like that. But then there's a question. I mean, Russia's a huge country. Yeah. And it's a question of how strong is that going to be? How extended is it going to be? And what is the result? And how hard is the military willing to push back?
That was one of the things also that Mr. Ludwig kind of mentioned, was that he said in Russia that the older population that's more tuned into Russian state media is more accepting, and then younger Russians that get their news from a variety of sources are now maybe more open to, I'm not so sure about this.
Right.
And it's sort of, that's why this whole thing, feels like it's almost like a lottery machine where, so many things, just so many moving parts, because, as Elena is probably talking about, Ukraine has become a much more fiercely independent place.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and so they're willing to fight and die for that independence. It's much different than what we saw in Afghanistan, where you go in, take out the capital, and just replace leadership. That's probably not going to be the case with Ukraine. No matter what happens, even if Kyiv falls here in the next few days, or if Russian troops begin to mobilize and get there on the ground and occupy, you could still see this long drawn out battle. And he thinks nothing short of international intervention will talk Putin down from it.
Right. And then there's just the question of how much stomach, countries have for actually incurring casualties in the name of this. I mean, economic sanctions are one thing, and we keep doing that, but it kind of feels at this point like kind of like sending a strongly worded letter or something. I mean, if the other person doesn't care, I mean, Russia would have to be effectively, I think, crippled and shut off, and their oil markets would be huge. I think, Germany halted construction of a gas pipeline, which really, hurts Germany because it needs that gas supply. Mm-hmm. But apparently there are other European countries that are talking about doing the same thing. So, I mean, it's just a question of where, where that pressure is applied, and at what is there an inflection point that's going to make Putin blink. And nobody seems to really know. But it seems that he does have these very grand ambitions. I mean, as Elena said, who stays president for 20 years? He's been in charge for over 20 years. Obviously, she feels like he has ambitions to be much more than an elected official.
It's almost like a pseudo elected official now,
Right.
A pretend democracy.
Oh, absolutely. And I have to say, I mean, we've been talking about what you can believe and what you can't believe, and there are so many stories coming out. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of overwhelming. I mean, I've seen footage of, and these are in major outlets that we're assuming have vetted them well, who have people on the ground, or there are Americans there, Europeans there who, have access, right? And, people are afraid to stay in their homes. This is what Elena told me. People are afraid to stay in their homes. They're either, a lot of people are taking shelter in the subways, and they're just taking their families and they're going down there. She said the shelves are cleared. Not a lot of food, stuff is already starting to run out. Fuel for vehicles. And of course, I saw some footage earlier in the day that showed people trying to evacuate, because there are people who are trying to get out. If you're close to the Polish border, or if you can get to the Polish border, that's one of the few border crossings that's still open that you can cross on foot. And they showed this big long line of cars. I mean, it's just gridlock. Mm-hmm. Nothing's moving. People are abandoning their cars, and they are getting out, and they are walking, taking their children, and they are walking across the border to Poland. So, I mean, this is going to be a huge crisis in terms of displaced people. I mean, we're going to hear really terrible stories. So,
it's interesting you're talking about what we can believe, because I think, as other people have said, this is the first major conflict that can sort of play out over social media, and we've already seen so much effort from journalists to sort of target and sort of elevate the things that they know for sure are misinformation, and we read somewhere like TikTok was a big spreader of misinformation.
Yeah, TikTok and Instagram. I was really shocked about the Instagram one.
Wow.
Apparently there's an Instagram account that is called @LiveFromUkraine, and they're actually pretending to be journalists in Ukraine and reporting on what's happening over there. And I know the other night before all of this actually happened, I went to bed and I woke up on Twitter and I saw things about explosions, and I was like, is this true? And it was like almost shocking that social media is playing such a big role in getting information out, but how much of that information can actually be trusted?
Right. They'll just sort of like take an old video that's like 7 years old from something else and put like a filter on it, say it's coming from Ukraine. It's really wild.
Or a translation. None of us know Russian or anything like that, and it's like, oh, this is what this person's saying to this person in this video, and it's like,
and we don't know.
Yeah, or asking for monetary donations. I mean, that's another thing. People are capitalizing on other people's pain, and like I think that's what blows my mind is, as a journalist, I want factual information to be put out there, so it's almost hard to believe when other people use this as an opportunity to get money or followers or things like that.
It's pretty gross. I saw a video that was posted to Twitter, and it was of these, like missiles going up, and there's a plane flying over, and it's being shot at. And I'm sitting there. I saw it on a couple of different accounts, and then I start looking at it. It's a video game.
Oh, that's actually, I saw that too.
Yeah.
And because what I saw was it said Ukrainian fighter pilot has taken down 5 Russian jets. And then so the Ukrainian pilot's being known as the ghost of Kyiv. And then in the video, it's very like zoomed in. You can't really see around. And then somebody in the comments was like, do they fly F-15s or something? Like somebody could identify the plane. I couldn't.
Right.
But it's definitely being shared. So people need to consider what it's one thing to view something, but maybe take a second and then really maybe consider if it's even worth, retweeting, sharing, or anything like that.
And outside of even opportunists and profiteers, I got to wonder how much is almost state sanctioned, because Russians have been filling our social media with bots for years now. So there's
absolutely.
So many of these things that are already established, it could easily be some kind of Russian bot farm that's, elevating these things.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And there are, you really do have to be careful. And obviously there's already a cyber war element to this. There was discussions about, Russian cyber attacks before they actually moved troops through. And, then I saw last night that Anonymous has announced that it has declared war on Russia.
Because anonymous people just going to war. Cyber war at your keyboards.
I think that's something, Jonathan Ludwig mentioned too. It's like, what if it's cyber attacks that draw NATO in? It could be something like you sort of like almost staring across this virtual field from each other, thinking, do we need a preemptive strike? Do we need to, do this or that? And do we go to cyber war with Russia? If that's
right.
And then the craziest thing is, the Putin and all that is, threatening basically nuclear warfare. Like he's like putting those weapons on the table, and it's like,
right. He's saying, you come in, you physically intervene, I've got nukes. It's a crazy thing. And I have to admit, I woke up this morning. I told you guys that I wanted to talk a little bit about mental health in the context of this, because we've all been through a lot. It's, and I woke up and I fell down this rabbit hole of news about Ukraine and wound up in what I think I can only describe as sort of a pit of despair.
Doom scrolling. That's what the kids call it.
Doom scrolling. I was seriously doom scrolling, and it was really bad, y'all. It really was. I've been, I've been dealing with what I would consider to be approaching a clinical level of depression for probably a year or two. And stuff like this can send you over the edge. I really just wanted to like crawl in a hole.
Yeah, that's why I've been staying off social media, is because it's like my anxiety is getting so high from all of this stuff. It's like, I just feel so bad for everyone over there, and I know it's not like directly affecting me, but it's still causing my anxiety to just go crazy.
And it feels like such a cop-out. I feel like such a weenie and such a jerk.
Like it's a privilege to be able to tune out.
Exactly.
Yes.
For me to say that, because there are people who are afraid to go to the grocery store. There are people who've taken their children and are hiding in subway tunnels. And no, it's too hard for me to read about, so I've got to look away. for my own mental health. That just seems like the weakest, wimpiest, whatever to me. But then I tell myself, would I say that to someone else who was having a hard time? And no, I never would. I would never talk to another person the way I talk to myself. I would never say the horrible things to another person that I say to myself. So I think that we all need to be really aware and take care of ourselves. And there's no shame.
No shame in seeking help, anyone who needs help. But yeah, there's definitely secondary trauma is a very real thing. But also, man, we're in the business where we tell ourselves we need to stay abreast of these things, so we can have a deeper understanding.
We can only tune out for so long because it's our job.
And
Exactly.
we expect that when people call us or seek us out for answers, we'll have answers for them.
Yeah, when I took this job, probably beforehand, especially during like election time, it was just like, I just want to tune out. I don't want to know what the latest candidate's doing, saying what. Like, it's not benefiting me at all. And then when I got this job, I was like, okay, now I kind of have to pay attention to whatever ridiculous so and so is doing. But then I never really thought I would be like typing words on a page that says, one country's invading another.
Right.
And like, okay, I gotta kind of understand that a little bit. And then also, like, I mean, it's really given me a perspective of sources of, who to pay attention to. And, right now where we get our stuff is, mostly through the AP that tries to, leave out any, a lot of
editorializing.
Yes.
Yeah, Reuters is pretty good too. I mean, there are some of I know people have this idea about mainstream media or whatever because of, whatever your favored, cable news channel is, you're going to think that the other one's pretty biased. And, it's important, as we've talked about before, to differentiate between talking heads and actual reporters, between news and commentary. Sometimes that's hard to tell the difference. But, I mean, just really watching your news sources. Now, that's hard when you're in a situation like this because people have evacuated, and a lot of the information you're getting is coming from the ground, and it's going to be coming from individuals who are just getting information out via social media. So sorting out the wheat from the chaff, as they say, is going to be tough.
I can tell you, I would quit Facebook yesterday if I wasn't in this business.
That's literally how I feel all the time. I wish I could just delete my social media and do like a social media cleanse, but I can't because of my job.
I wouldn't worry at all about exclamation points, Ashland.
It would be all over.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why it's so important to get your news from actual news sources that are reliable and not social media. Honestly, I deleted my Instagram from my phone today because it's like, I don't want to be seeing all these outside sources that are not factual. It's not benefiting me in any way right now. And honestly, I don't use Instagram as much for work, not as much as like Facebook and Twitter and things like that. But, yeah, stay off social media and make sure if you're watching TV news that it's actual news and not commentary. Because people get them confused all the time.
Just read the newspaper.
Right. And think about what you're sharing before you share it.
Take a break if you need it. Definitely seek professional help if you feel you need it. We are not mental health professionals.
No, we are not.
Don't take our advice, but
we are not doctors.
Seek out professional help.
Yeah.
Disclaimer.
Big disclaimer. But yeah. So, and there's a lot of human tragedy going on. So, those stories are going to be coming out. There'll also be stories of heroism and hopefully there's a story of some kind of diplomatic solution soon, and not so much bloodshed, but we'll see what happens.
Okay. So, we'll have a couple stories to look for.
Yeah.
And probably do a little following up, see how things are going. That's probably going to do it for this week. Thank you for joining us in the newsroom.
In the Newsroom is edited and produced by me, Chris Peters. You can find all of our past episodes and show notes at studiostillwater.net. This podcast is made possible with support from the Stillwater News Press. please consider subscribing to our award-winning newspaper and help support local journalism. Go to stwnewspress.com to sign up. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.